You're listening to the Intel Hub. We're back with our guest, Bob Chapman. Of course, his website is theinternationalforecaster.com. You can go over there and subscribe to the International Forecaster. Bob, before the break, it kind of snuck up on me. We were talking about Goldman Sachs. They were now saying that some of their bailout funds that they received from AIG, from taxpayer money, were given to international banks. You were just getting into how much money that was.
Yeah, it was $112.4 billion, and it was spread out by quite a few institutions, and all the names have not still been released. And the Federal Reserve was asked for those names a couple of years ago, and they wouldn't give them. Bloomberg, which is a news service, pursued them, and they went to Federal District Court, and the judge says you got to give them the names. And the Federal Reserve said, it's a state secret, we're not going to give you anything. Well, finally, Congress talked the Fed into releasing the names, and one of the recipients was Goldman. Goldman didn't disperse the money, the Fed did. And so what the American taxpayer did was bail out all those counterparties, as they're known, all the money that was needed to cover the bad debts of, in this case, AIG. AIG was a criminal front. The reason it was saved is that they manage the Senate and Congressional retirement plan, and AIG was a front for the CIA for years. Now, you wouldn't know that unless you did what I did, but they were paymasters, they were a cover, and on and on. And so that's why they were saved. General Electric was saved as well. They are one of the kingpins in this group of people, which I call the Illuminati, that are interested in world government and the imposition thereof and the things that we're talking about here. But anyway, the money was dispersed, and the U.S. taxpayer gets to pay it. And the counterparties were people who were sold insurance in the form of derivatives against different types of economic situations, like Bank A wanted to buy $100 million worth of bonds, and they wanted insurance on those bonds, on the price of the bonds. What they were after was the yield. And so for a fee, AIG, like others, would sell them a derivative which would protect them. The problem is, or was, AIG didn't have any money to do that. They were running what they call naked. And because they were naked, when they went bankrupt, nobody got paid. So the Federal Reserve decided, well, the American taxpayer can handle that. So they paid out the money.
What was the point, like, Bob, because you know a lot more about this than I do, and I'm still trying to learn some of this. What was the point that they, I mean, is this just a total criminal scam that they paid out these companies taxpayer money in these bailouts? I mean, why not? Or is there an underlying reason? Would it have caused major tragedy in the markets? Why should we bail out a company? For instance, you know, I've owned companies before, and in my case, one of my companies I owned, the union basically induced me into crumbling because of what they were trying to do to me. They salted one of my companies, and I lost one of my companies. But, you know, in my case, I didn't get any bailouts, and, you know, my company just closed, and that was that. What allows, you know, this to happen? Is this just a total scam, or did they really need to do this to save the world economy?
Well, first of all, the people who were involved created it. And so it was a scam, and it was a criminal scam. Someday that'll be found out. But there's no investigations now because they control everything.
Right.
Second of all, if the money had not been given to these banks, most of them were banks, that had bought this insurance, they probably would have gone under. And there would have been a financial crisis, and banks throughout the world, in the United States and particularly in Europe, would have gone bankrupt. Sometimes some of them were pension plans as well. And so in this episode that you've seen for the past 3 years, the Federal Reserve, their only intention was to save financial institutions. 2 reasons. They weren't ready to take the whole system down yet. And second of all, they are all interconnected, so all these people own all these different companies jointly. Now, some of them are banks, brokerage firms, insurance companies, transnational conglomerates like GE, General Motors. And so that is what happened, and the reason it happened is the whole system would have came down. They have spent virtually no money on saving anybody who's got a mortgage, anybody who owes anybody any money. They didn't do that. They don't care about the public. And the result has been a withdrawal of credit from the system, and what's happened is companies are closing. They're laying off people to cut expenses so they can stay in business. And the end result is that we don't have a recovery. They don't intend to have a recovery. The only reason they're doing what they're doing is they want to find the right point to pull the plug.
Yeah,
that's really what it's all about. And each time in history, like in the 1930s, when they've done this, they've had a war in order to extricate themselves. Blame everything on the war. And so we got a war coming up. And I don't know where it's going to be or when it's going to be, but it's coming.
Yeah, and we can get into that here in a little bit. That's exactly right, Bob. It seems a little backwards to me. For instance, Bob, what's your opinion on this? They applied these bailouts to all of these banks, and why not apply the bailout to the American citizen? Say, for instance, every American citizen gets $100,000, and then they essentially pay off their home loan, or they apply it to that. Or could that bottom-down approach have done anything different, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, it's a great idea. Second of all, it's logical. And third of all, they don't use logic. They have their own agenda. And so they're doing what they want to do, and they don't care about the public. And so you got to get that out of your head. There's no rationale to this. There's no reason. You can't figure it out unless you know what they're after, unless you know what they're doing, unless you know what the end game is. And most writers, reporters, people who are in the news business, they don't understand. They don't get it. And even when it's explained to them, they can't believe anything so diabolical could exist. Well, I'm sorry, it does.
Yeah, and that's just like with this oil spill. You hear conspiracy theories tossed around on the internet. There's talk of all sorts of things. And you see the oil spill happen, whether it's an accident or orchestrated. Now we're seeing something a little bit different, Bob. Now we've got a second spill in Louisiana where a barge hit an oil well, and it's spewing up 20 feet into the air, into the marshes. And now you've got another oil spill into the Kalamazoo River of reportedly about 1 million gallons, and who knows if it's still going, flowing into the Kalamazoo River in Michigan, and essentially it's going to make its way into Lake Michigan if it hasn't already. We're seeing some of the same protocols being implemented that they were implementing down in and around Grand Isle. A little bit of militarization as far as they've already blocked off some of the roads. They're not letting the locals go down to this river. these oil spills, now there's 3 of them in America here. There's potential that this oil can get into our water systems if it isn't already. There's reports of this oil in Corexit raining down, burning holes through crops, the whole 9 yards. Have you seen any of this in the media, Bob? And do you think this is going to move us even closer to a total economic collapse, total depression? Is this going to push us over the edge?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's going to push us over the edge. I believe, and I have from the very beginning, that what you've just witnessed was a false flag operation.
Mm-hmm.
And what they did is they drilled into the side of an asphalt dome.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, there's oil all over the Gulf. And I've seen pictures of it taken from a small plane, a film, in a plane that was not supposed to be flying over where they were. And so they did this for a number of reasons. The most important was to get a carbon tax. Number 2, to pass cap and trade. Number 3, they wanted to enforce control over that entire area along the coast from Texas all the way down to Florida. And the reason for that is that they wanted to do a number of things. And one of them was to be able to go in and buy the real estate real cheap, just like they did in New Orleans with Katrina. And there is a large amount of people along that coast who are poor, and many of them live on welfare, and there's a lot of retirees there. And quite frankly, they'd like to get rid of them if they could. You have to understand parts of the structure that these people are involved in. One of the things that they believe very strongly in is that people should not be existing on Earth. They figure that 60 to 80% of the people on Earth shouldn't be here because they're eating up the resources and so on and so forth. It's a form of euthanasia, and they'd like to get rid of them. That's why they have wars. This is a lot more complicated than you think it is. But anyway, it was a false flag operation, and that's what they wanted to do. Cap and trade is dead. They blew it. Carbon tax is dead. They blew it. Whether these 2 new incidents were planned and executed by these people, I don't know. They could very well have been, but I don't know. But I do know that the first 3-month-old problem that we're all aware of was caused by the government and people behind government.
Yeah, now we're seeing this National Ocean Council, an executive order by Obama, dividing our oceans into 9 parts. It's part of the UN Agenda 21 program. It almost correlates with the Council of the Governors that Obama put in, where they divided the country into 10 FEMA regions and put people over that. What do you think? I mean, in this Gulf region, do you think they're also going after some sort of resource grab or the oil in the region? Are they trying to shut it down or open it up, in your opinion, to drilling?
Well, I think from what we've seen, the actions of what we've seen, they'd like to shut it down. Mm-hmm. Now, what their reasoning for that is, I don't know, but it certainly would make the price of oil go up. And, of course, the price of oil and gasoline and petroleum products to American citizens would go higher. Americans are paying 40% of what other nations pay for gasoline for their cars. The other nations are taxing gasoline very, very heavily. And
Bob, we got to take a break right now. We'll be back in a couple minutes. We're joined with Bob Chapman, the internationalforecaster.com. This is the Intel Hub. We're joined by Bob Chapman, the international forecaster, internationalforecaster.com, going over all sorts of issues across the board, the oil spill economy. What are we seeing in the markets now, Bob? Any indication in these markets? I know we dropped below 10 a while back. Is there any indication in the markets, the way they're fluctuating or anything? I'm not an economist, that would lead you to believe, something's coming with the markets dropping or anything like that.
Well, first of all the markets are manipulated, and it's legal. Mm-hmm. Under another executive order put into place by Ronald Reagan in August of 1988 as a measure against what happened on October the 19th, 1987, when the stock market collapsed. And so the U.S. government, Treasury Department, and the Federal Reserve, among others, are part of the President's working group in financial markets. And so they're rigging out markets all the time. And, I've been in this business over 50 years, so I know what they're doing. And the Dow Jones is being manipulated to hold it up. And the reason why is if it goes down, these pension plans lose 30, 40, 50% of their value. And, of course, the remainder of people's savings that are in those entities, as well as other companies and institutions that are invested, are going to lose a lot of money after they've lost piles of money in real estate, both residential and commercial. I don't have to tell you about that. You're well aware of it. And so the market is being held up by the government and people around the government. The price of gold and silver are being deliberately suppressed, and have been for a long time, although unsuccessfully, because both have moved relentlessly higher, during that period from 1988 onward. And so what's going to happen to the economy in the near future is this. There isn't a recovery. The money that's been spent, which is between $2.3 and $2.5 trillion, its benefits are gone now. They've been played out. The Fed is feeding money and credit to central banks in Europe, which are in turn going and buying treasury paper, bonds, notes, etc. Mm-hmm. And that's why the Treasury is able to continue to fund. And at the same time, that's inflationary, but we have this underlying undertow of deflation caused by the real estate industry and other industries. Lots of businesses going under, things like that. And so the inflation is offsetting the deflation, so we don't have a deflationary depression. So you say to yourself, what's next?
Yeah.
Now we have to, there's no way we can know when they're finally going to pull the plug on this thing. But their MO, modus operandi, has been in the past to inflate. And the banks
Bob,
have borrowed, this is a solution they're going to use. Mm-hmm. The banks have borrowed money from the Fed. The Fed created out of thin air. They didn't pay any interest on it. They gave it back to the Fed in their accounts. And the Fed's paying them 2.5% interest, which you get to pay as a taxpayer.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Now, money's sitting there. It's called sterilized. Mm-hmm. What they're going to do, I think, is kill the 2.5% and force the banks to start making loans that they should have been making to small and medium-sized businesses.
Uh-huh.
They are the ones who employ and create 70% of the jobs in our economy. So by doing that, the economy will be uplifted How much they'll lend, I don't know. 500 billion, a trillion? It'll be a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And that will reduce unemployment from 22 3/8% probably to 20%, and that's just a guesstimate. There's no way of knowing. And the economy will have less of a revival than it's had over the last year and a half. And that will last for 2 years because I expect them to inject about $5 trillion.
Wow. Absolutely. Bob, in closing, why don't you plug your international forecaster, let folks know where to get it, and I'll have to get with you off air sometime so we can get you a banner up for your international forecaster.
All you have to do is link them to it.
Okay.
Off your site. But anyway, publishing by email Wednesdays and Saturdays runs around 40 pages. Business, finance, economic, social, and political issues all over the world. We have a hard copy for those of you who are not on the Internet. That comes out twice a month. You can get a free copy. We get 2 sites, theinternationalforecaster.com.
Well,
theinternational, FORECASTER.com.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to, Alex forwarded me the international forecaster. I've been so buried, I haven't had time to go through it, but I'm looking forward to it. It looks like a lot of great information. Bob Chapman, thanks for coming on the Intel Hub. And until next time, my friend, we'll see you later. Have a good day.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yep. There he goes, Bob Chapman, internationalforecaster.com. Check it out. A lot of great information. You know, I was hoping to get to a lot of questions. I was going to get into all sorts of stuff, but he'll be back, and next time we'll go into it. We'll get to a lot more. But he did educate me on quite a few things, so very interesting.